The Cabinet Office Minister and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove, is with us this morning. Hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Why are you right when so many of your backbenchers are wrong?
Well, I don't think it's binary like that. I think there are a range of views, obviously, in the House of Commons and in the country about how we tackle coronavirus. We make sure that we listen respectfully to not just MPs but others in order to try to come with the right strategy. But I do think we do have the right strategy, which is to make sure that we bear down on the virus and ensure that the NHS is not overwhelmed. It was right to take action with the national lockdown, very painful though it is for many, in order to make sure that the infection rate, which was doubling over time, was brought under control.
But you can't convince them, so they're not going to vote with you later on.
Well, I hope that not just me, but others...
You representing the government?
No, sure, absolutely. I hope we will be able to convince as many people as possible to support the government today, because I think it's critically important that we have these tough but fair tiers in place in order to ensure that we can continue to beat back the virus. The vaccine is coming over the hill. With vaccination, we will be able to get life back to normal. And with the vaccines so soon, or rather coming so soon, then it's really important that we don't lose the discipline that we have now and the ability to ensure that our NHS is there for people, particularly in the very tough months of January and February.
OK, I want to come back to vaccines in a little while, if I may, but I want to talk about tiers first of all. Did you want London to be in Tier 3?
Well, we never discuss what happens in Cabinet committees.
What you want personally?
No, of course. But the whole point about Cabinet committees is that the discussions there are private. But the one thing that I will say is that it's always easier to move an area from a tougher tier to a lower tier once we're confident that the infection is under control, rather than relaxing things and then having to put the brakes on again, as we've seen in Wales. So in Wales, they had a two-week lockdown.
About London for now.
Yeah, no, but I think the Welsh comparison shows what happens
when
you pull the restraint back too far.
Yeah, as far as the capital is concerned, do you think it should have been in Tier 3?
No, I think the right decision was taken. I think that the proportionate approach is to make sure that we have Tier 2, which is effective at stabilising and, in some cases, reducing the infection rate, is right for London. But I think we need to keep all of these things under review. But I'm confident that the efforts that we're making now will ensure that those areas in Tier 3, over time, if we bring the infection under control in those areas, can be lower. And as I say, the lesson from Wales, which we're all watching, and we have friends and relatives there, is that too rapid a relaxation means that you have to slam the brakes on again. And the one thing that we all want to avoid is another national lockdown.
Is it definitely not going to happen?
Another national lockdown? I'm as confident can be.
Because George Eustace wouldn't rule it out yesterday.
Well, I'm as confident can be that we won't need one, because the tiers that we have now are pretty robust. So we know that these new, tougher Tier 3 measures will bring infection rates down. We know that in Tier 2, things are stable and indeed in some cases declining as well. And that means we're on the right trajectory with the infection moving in the right way. We've still got a lot of people out there who are infected, a lot of people in hospital, and we need to make sure that the NHS is there in January and in February for people who have other conditions as well.
Can you rule it out?
You can never rule anything out in politics, but as I say, I'm pretty confident on the basis of the rigour with which these new tiers are applying that we can prevent a national lockdown. One thing I fear, though, would be that if we were to relax the situation too rapidly, then we would have the situation which we've had in some other countries and indeed in Wales, where you have to slam the brakes on again.
But that happened here, didn't it, in October?
Well, you're absolutely right. One of the problems...
So we can't rule it out?
Well, I think the distinction between what happened in October and what's happening now is that the tier system in October was not quite as rigorous as the one that we have now. And also, there were many more areas in Tier 1, and we know that in the old Tier 1, there was a risk that infections would rise, and it was rising, the infection rate was rising in every part of the country when we had to go into that national lockdown. OK, hospitality industry, massively important at this time of year. Massive confusion about what you can and can't do in Tier 2. What is a substantial meal? Please tell me. Do you like Scotch eggs? I love Scotch eggs. But one of the things...
They're horrible. I hate them. So if I'm not going to eat that, what else can I eat that's substantial?
Well, there are a whole range of things, Kay. We can go out together and I can take you through a range of substantial meals. But the definition of a substantial meal...
What about garlic bread?
Well...
I believe it's the future. I've tried it.
Well... let's share a garlic baguette alongside whatever else, lasagna, prawn linguine, whatever. But the serious point is that the definition of a substantial meal has been there in law for some time. If you or I were to take our 16 or 17-year-old out to the pub, we could order an alcoholic drink for them alongside the substantial meal that they have. And that is a well-understood definition in the hospitality trade.
What constitutes a drink? Is it a bottle of wine?
Well, it depends what you're celebrating. But the critical thing here is that...
But you could sit and drink a bottle of wine all night, couldn't you?
Well, we've made it clear, I think George made it clear, George Eustace yesterday, that the broad principle is this, that you're allowed to finish a drink that you've been enjoying with your substantial meal, but what you can't do is order drinks after 10 o'clock. Drinks that you've ordered with your meal you can consume, and you can make sure that you've got the period between 10 and 11 to leave in an orderly fashion.
Who is going to police whether or not I eat my meal? I might order a meal but not eat it.
Well, again, the rules have been in place for children for some time.
So what's your understanding of that? So if I don't eat my meal, am I still allowed to drink my drink?
Well, again,
you can see how confusing it is. For people.
Well, I can see that, of course, people can always ask questions about whether or not they should finish their meal, whether or not they've eaten half of it. Does that count as having eaten a substantial meal?
Tell me, I don't know. Do you think it does?
I think common sense is the right answer here.
Oh, so what's the answer?
Well, as has been the case when people have ordered meals for 16 and 17-year-old children when they've been ordering alcoholic drinks for them, the law is pretty clear. And common sense would prevail. I think we all know that there have been some occasions in the past when there have been individual places that have been, operating way beyond the rules and, operating as quasi-nightclubs. Appropriate action has been taken there. But also, I think that the truth is that the overwhelming majority, nearly everyone I know who's involved in the hospitality trade, takes their responsibilities seriously, and so the rules are pretty clear.
So if we went out for dinner together, we could have a Scotch egg, a garlic bread and 2 bottles of wine and we'd be fine?
Well, I think we might have a headache in the morning, but I think the point is, again, a substantial meal is a well-understood definition, one that's been there in law for years now.
OK. Do I need to have a vaccine passport in order to go to the pub?
No.
Will I need to?
No. I think the most important thing to do is to make sure that we vaccinate as many people as possible. There are 3 vaccines that are going through appropriate testing now to make sure that they're absolutely safe. And the most important thing is to make sure that we get people, as many people as possible, starting with the most vulnerable, and then those who work in the front line of the NHS, vaccinated effectively. OK. Will I need to have a vaccine passport to go to the theatre or to go to a sporting event? No, I don't think so, no.
So how are you going to convince people to have these vaccines? Because there's a significant minority who don't want to have them.
Yes, there are, and I think that's a big challenge, because we've got to persuade people who are opposed to taking a vaccine that it's in all of our collective interest. We all know that there's been this issue with measles in the past. We know that if you don't have as many people vaccinated as possible, there are measles outbreaks. I think that we can take on some of the arguments from the anti-vax brigade. They're not really based in science. There's a very rigorous process that we undergo in order to make sure vaccines are safe. Sorry, Kate.
Perception is reality. That's the problem, isn't it?
Well, but
are you going to use celebrities to try to get people to have a vaccine because people don't trust politicians? I find that difficult to believe, but apparently that's the case.
Well, I think it's certainly the case that people sometimes take with a pinch of salt some of the things that politicians of any party say, which is why I think it's important that we're led by the science and we're led by the authoritative evidence that vaccines work.
Which celebrities do you think might convince the British public?
Well, I think you would, Kay, but but beyond that, I'm not sure that I should be celebrity picking. I think the most important thing is to concentrate on the quality of the arguments. People in this country have common sense. The overwhelming majority can see that getting vaccinated is not just good for you, it's also good for others. It's a way of making sure that Granny and Grandad, Mum and Dad are safe. OK, so there won't be a vaccine passport? No, that's not being planned. At all, ever? Well, not happening. Not happening, zip, nada, no. certainly I'm not planning to introduce any vaccine passports, and I don't know anyone else in government.
OK, let's talk about Brexit. What are the remaining sticking points?
Well, there are three, really. The first is fisheries. The EU still want to take the lion's share of the fish in our waters, which is just not fair, given that we're leaving the EU. The second thing is some of the EU rules. The EU still want us to be tied to their way of doing things. And then the third thing is what happens if there's a dispute. The EU are at the moment reserving the right, if there's any sort of dispute, to not quite rip everything up, but really to impose some quite sort of penal and tough restrictions on us. And we don't think that's fair.
I know that fishing is very close to your heart, obviously, given family connections. So I did look up a little bit about fishing. More than £160 million worth of the English fishing quota is in the hands of vessels by companies based in Iceland, Spain and the Netherlands. And we're talking about 12,000 British fishermen, as opposed to 13,000 jobs that are potentially going from Arcadia tomorrow. Are we overplaying our hand on fishing?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the case that if you look also at some of the European countries, you can also say that the number of people employed in fisheries in their economies is relatively small. But it matters hugely to this country that we have, given our heritage and also given the potential that we have in managing our own waters, not just to revive coastal communities, but also to manage our seas in a more environmentally sensitive way. It really matters that we get this right. And there's no reason why we can't be a country like Iceland and like Norway, which manage access to their own waters. It's part of being an independent country.
But we did sell off quite a lot of our fishing rights, didn't we, in the 90s, I think, wasn't it?
Well, there are some people who have sold their quotas, but the broader point is that ultimately we as a country should decide who comes into our waters. We're not saying that there shouldn't be any boats from any European country. It's just that, you know, like our neighbours in Norway and our friends in Iceland, they're able to say, look, we're an independent country. These are our waters. If you want to come in, we can negotiate that. But ultimately, this belongs to us.
What I'm saying to counter that is that I understand that, but there are only 12,000 British fishermen.
At the moment.
At the moment, indeed. And also, we sold off quite a lot of our fishing rights some 20-odd years ago. Countering that, 13,000 jobs potentially going in Arcadia, 20,000 extra alcohol-related deaths because of COVID-19 and the lockdowns here in the United Kingdom. Are we getting it in proportion?
I think so, yes. I mean, I think the Arcadia story is a tragic one. And I'm not going to criticise any individual, but there's been a lot of reporting that points out some of the missteps that have been made by the management there. More broadly, we know that the High Street...
You're talking about Philip Green?
I'm not going to get into personalities, but I think that we know that there's been a problem with the management there. But we know more broadly, to be fair, that the High Street is facing unprecedented pressure. Part of that is, a significant part of that, of course, is COVID. That's why I think it's good news more broadly that shops will reopen on Wednesday if we get the new tier system through. And you make the point about COVID-related deaths. And again, that's why we're taking the steps that we are in order to try to reduce infection. You've got to do all of these things at once. Negotiate a fair Brexit, deal with COVID, and also trying to provide support to people who are working in retail.
Why does the government feel that Sir Philip Green's mismanaged Arcadia?
Well, there's a broader question about the management of Arcadia, but as I say, I'm not going to get into the personalities of it. I think most analysts would say that there have been some missteps along the way.
Two very quick questions, if I may. Rita Ora got in terrible trouble because of her 30th birthday bash.
Yes.
Thought on her?
Well, she's apologised very graciously, and so I think we can leave it there. I mean, she's an incredibly talented singer. She made a mistake. We all make mistakes. She apologised, so I think, you know, we can let that be. OK, and finally, in September, last time I spoke to you, you said that if I was free on Christmas Day, I should come round. Yes, well, we're allowed to have 3 bubbles, or 3 households in the bubble. If you really want to, Kay, then I'll have a word with my wife. But I suspect you've probably got many, many better offers on Christmas Day. Is there room still at the table? We haven't decided all our Christmas arrangements. But if you want to come round, I'll have a word with Sarah and make the case But as I say, I suspect you've got lots
But
of better offers.
you did promise.
Yeah, no, sure. No, but I think you probably...
And you always keep your word.
Yeah, but if you really want to, Kay, we'll do everything to make sure it happens. But as I say,
I'll bring a big bottle of wine. It'll only count as one drink.
OK, that's fine. All right, then you're definitely coming.
It's good to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Very much appreciated, as always. Thank you.